Hello Tallinn, I'm sorry we can't be with you live. We thought we'd record this presentation as a backup in case of technical problems. The presentation today is going to be asking this single question: how can stories boost my exports? And I think the right kind of story can. I'm going to be talking about all kinds of different Estonian clients I've worked with. Happily, one of them is here with me in the room, not in person, but Chocolala, the guys who make that gorgeous chocolate in the Tallinn Old Town. Well, I've got some Chocolala chocolate here, so I feel like I'm with you in spirit, even if I can't be with you in the conference. Okay, so we've already heard in the conference this morning about how there are more online scams out there. The guys from Swedbank were talking about this being a real problem since lockdown started. And it reminded me of something that somebody had said to me on one of my first trips to Estonia. And they said, we're worried. When people see the dial tone for Estonia come up on their mobile phone, do they think, who's this? Is this a scam call? Because they don't really know anything about Estonia. And if they don't really know anything about a country, it's hard for them to trust you. And of course, business is built on trust. Now, what's interesting about trust is, you can't put trust in a spreadsheet. Trust comes from stories, it comes from people. So what we're going to talk about today are the kinds of stories you can tell. There's a particular kind of story you can tell that will build up trust. And here's a little clue as to where that story comes from. I want you to hold out your hand and draw a kind of roller coaster, like an arc going up and down. Now, it might feel very silly, but everyone in the conference does it. You won't feel silly. So take your finger and draw an up and a down, like a roller coaster, because that's the shape of a story that people trust. Now, come on to that later. What I'm going to tell you, though, is that stories work better than logic, facts, or opinions. And I'm going to explain why. One of the main reasons why stories work so well is that as humans, we're constantly trying to work out what's going to happen next. We've got these very clever brains that can see, we can try and predict the future. And the most unpredictable thing in most situations you're in is other people. What are they going to do next? So we tell stories about what people do, and we try to learn what people are going to do next. Let's do a little experiment. You're going to have to do a little vote in a moment. So here's the experiment. I want you to work out what happens next to this woman. This woman's called Linda. And I'm going to tell you a story about Linda, and I want you to kind of create a picture in your head of what Linda is like and what she does next. So here's Linda. So Linda is 31. She's single. She's outspoken. She's very bright. You knew her at university. And when she was a student, she was concerned with social justice. She used to go on demonstrations and marches. Now, 10 years have passed and you meet Linda again. What happened next to Linda? Okay, so option A, Linda works in a call centre. Or option B, Linda works in a call centre and is an active feminist blogger. Okay, so hands up now for option A. I'm going to trust you to do. Hands up now for option B. Okay, now what's interesting in this test is that almost everybody, 90% of people, vote for option B. This test has been done since the 1970s and it's the same every single time. About 90% go with B. 90% of people are wrong. So here's why. If we can just pull the display up full screen for a second, I'll show you. This is a Venn diagram. So Venn diagram, okay, well that's the circle of women working in call centres. And then the second circle is women who are active feminist bloggers. And the intersection, the bit between the two, the overlap, is women who are both working in call centres and active feminist bloggers. So that's B, and it's a tiny area, whereas that is A. A is massive. And in fact, A, if we can come back on the camera, A includes B. So if you voted for A, you get B thrown in. So A is always the right answer, logically. And B is the wrong answer, logically. But 90% of people choose B. Why is that? Well, it's because B is a happy ending to the story. Here's Linda, she's still being a rebel. A is boring. B is a good story. But A is the logical answer. So stories beat logic every time. You don't have to teach kids how to watch a movie. You have to teach them how to do maths. Okay, well, you might be thinking, okay, so we're not very logical, that's fine, but I can still give people the facts. So why don't I just give people the facts and let them make their own mind up about my product or my service? Well, here's the problem with facts. There are just too many of them. So let me give you a little example. I need a new bike. I put need in inverted commas because my wife doesn't think I need. I've got 2 bikes already, but I need a new bike because I love cycling. It's my thing. So I need a new bike. So I go looking for bikes, and you might think, well, I make bikes. So imagine you're a company that makes bikes, and I'm a customer who wants a bike. So you might think, well, we're just going to give you the facts about the bike. So here's our bike, here's the technical specifications, and I'll make a decision based on technical specification. Well, okay, in theory, but here's the problem. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of other people out there making bikes as well as you. So there are lots of facts coming at me. And instead of making a decision, I'm just left in this kind of paralyzed by information. There's too many facts. So when I was looking for my bike, I started looking online, and yeah, pretty soon you've got hundreds of options of bikes. Even when I specify it's a gent's bike, I want it for touring and a bit of off-road. Even when I specify that, there's still 1,000 bikes out there, and I can't decide. Then I saw this one. So this is a company called Trek, and there's a bike, okay. There's some technical specifications. Yes, great. But then they did this. They told a little story, and they said, this bike is right for you if adventure is who you are. You're the friend who other friends borrow camping equipment from. And I'm going, yes, I am. They do. That's me. And then they said, you've made as many meals on a campfire this year as you have on a kitchen. And I was going, well, I haven't, but I wish I had. So that story speaks to me. It speaks to my ambitions, my dreams, speaks to the things I love doing. So it speaks to the heart. The story speaks to the heart. And so out of all those thousands of different bikes, that's the one that I remember. Now I want to do a little experiment with you. The people in the conference can play this game. I want you to imagine you're going to try and sell a bike, right? You're going to try and sell a bike to the person sitting behind you, but don't turn around and look at them. Don't look. So you can try and remember the person sitting behind you in the conference, and what kind of bike might they buy? Well, you might remember it's a male or female, a man or a woman. Okay, what else do you know about them? Well, they're probably Estonian, they're probably in business, otherwise they wouldn't be here. What else do you know about them? Well, they're an adult, they're not a child, so you can start to work out what bike to sell. But it's hard, because you don't really know much about the person sitting behind you. Okay, now, turn around. Turn around and look at the person behind you. Okay, this will be funny, because they're also turning around looking at the person behind them. Okay. So now you know it's a man or a woman. Now you know the age. Now you know a little bit about their kind of lifestyle and the way they dress. And so if it's an Estonian hipster sitting behind you, well, okay, maybe you could sell them an Ampler e-bike. Yeah? So maybe that's the kind of bike that you're going to make that. You're not going to try and sell them the wrong kind of bike. You have to know your customer. Now you can then think, okay, well, I'm going to give you a load of facts. Here's a load of facts about e-bikes. Or I can, better than that, I can say, here's a bike we've just sold to someone like you. Oh. Now, facts are facts, they're fine, right? The story, here's a bike we've just sold to someone like you, that's called social proof. Social proof is, I look around at what other people are doing, and that acts like proof in a way that facts are proof, but stories feel like social proof. That's why they're really powerful. So one tip I would say to you, all of you, in whatever company you're in, whether you're selling bikes or selling software, whatever you're selling, listen to your customers' stories. Have a conversation with them. The more you can find out about the person you're trying to export to, the more likely you are to find social proof. What you're trying to do is say, hey, we've just sold something to someone like you. Maybe somebody in the same market, somebody in the same sector, somebody in the same country, doesn't matter. The closer you can get with your story to the person you're trying to sell to, the better, because that's social proof. Okay, so that's facts, and why social proof and stories are better than facts. Finally, why not opinions? Look, I've got an opinion about my work. I've got an opinion about my product. The usual one we hear from people in business is, this is a quality product. Yeah, this is quality components. This is a quality service. What's wrong with that? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with quality. Put your hand up in the audience. anyone who is not making a quality product. Anyone who's not using quality ingredients. Yeah? Anyone who doesn't care about quality control, put your hand up. And my bet is nobody has their hand up. Of course you don't. So if everybody is saying it, it's worthless. You're wasting your breath because everybody is saying quality. Everyone in the food business is saying we use natural ingredients. Everyone's talking about being innovative. So if everyone's saying it, there's no point saying it. Let me give you an example. So my delightful, delicious Chocolala chocolate is my example. So Chocolala, they make this fantastic chocolate where they use the berries from the fruits from the forest, so the berries from Estonian forests. And yeah, those are quality natural ingredients. But so too is everybody else's chocolate is using quality natural ingredients. Then there's Christy. So Christy is the woman who founded Chocolala with her husband. Now, when Christy was a girl, she used to go out into the forests with her mum, picking berries. You all did. Okay, now Christy's a mum, and she goes out into the forest with her girls, and they pick berries. And they pick the moss, the reindeer moss as well. So they pick the ingredients. And those are the berries that go into Chocolala chocolate. They're Estonian forest fruit that go into that chocolate. So here's the thing. When you use words like quality, everybody is saying the same thing. It's generic. When you tell a story, it's unique. It belongs to you. Only you can. There's 1,000, possibly 1,000,000 different people making quality natural ingredients. There's only one Christy in the forest with her daughters. So that's a unique thing. Your story is like your fingerprint. It's unique. Your opinions, who cares? So, stories work because when you imagine Christy in the forest, the story starts a movie playing in your head. You've never met Christy before. You've never met her daughters. But you know what a forest looks like. And you know what picking berries looks like. You know what picking berries tastes like. So do your customers. So tell that story and the movie starts playing in their head. Say the word quality. What's the movie playing in your head? There isn't one. Okay. Here's another example of a movie. Movies are when something happens. What do movie directors say? They say action. Stuff happens. Here's another example, another Estonian company, Silent Space. So Sparry, who runs Silent Space, these guys, they make kind of modular office spaces that you can bring into your office and create some silence where you can carry on meetings and calls in a noisy environment. Okay, so you get the idea. He told me a great story. They were at a sales conference one time last year, and these two guys came up to them and said, "Can we check out your space?" And the Sparry says, "Yes, of course, come on, I'll show you." And they said, "No, you stay out, we just want to..." And these guys sat in the space and they started running a whole series of tests. They were testing speakers, they were testing mobile phones, they were testing laptops, all kinds of tests. And then they came out and they said to Sparry, "We might be back, but we might not." And so he watched them and they went round the conference and they did the same thing with every exhibitor who was selling the same kind of product. They did the same test. And Sparry's thinking, who are these guys? The next day they come back and they say, "We're from Spotify. We'd like to buy all your stock you've got everything you've got here, we're going to buy it." Okay. Now, Spotify know audio. That's their business. They know the importance of good quality sound and good quality silence. So that's a story. It works really, really well because it works on two levels. There's here's a thing we've just sold to someone you've heard of, someone you know. So that's a brilliant story. That's social proof. Plus it's a movie. There's Sparry in the conference. There's the guys from Spotify acting all mysterious. It works as a story. It plays a little movie. And it works because it's social proof. Because I'm going, I've heard of Spotify. Wow, if they want this product, okay. So here's the question for you again. Think about your website. Think about your social media. Think about your LinkedIn. Are you telling stories about your customers so that I can look at them and go, oh, they're selling to BMW, they're selling to Volkswagen, they're selling... Yep, are you telling stories about your customers on your website? Better still, are your customers telling stories about you? Are they giving you testimonials? We love working with Silent Space because... That's social proof. It also starts a movie playing in your head. So let's talk about the movies. Particularly, let's talk about Hollywood movies, because when we talk about telling a great story, not just a good story, but a great story, we can learn from Hollywood. And remember, I said before, it's about that kind of roller coaster. Trace your finger. It's like, yeah, the rise and fall. That's what makes a good story. So what I was asking you to do with your finger is to trace this. This is a story arc. And a story arc is very simple. It's like a progress of things happening over time, and they go from bad to good and bad to good. It's like a roller coaster. Now, I'm going to talk to you about 3 very, very simple story arcs that you can use, or you can be aware of anyway, when you're telling stories about your work. And the 3 stories are these. It's the Cinderella story, the Titanic story, and the Hobbit story. And they're all different shapes, as you can see. The first one is the story you're telling right now. If you're telling a story at all, you're telling a Cinderella story. The second one is the story your customers might be hearing. And this is a danger story, the Titanic story. And the third one is a realistic story you should be telling. So it goes optimist, pessimist, realist. So let's just talk through them very quickly. The Cinderella story. The reason why you're probably telling this story right now is that it's a very optimistic story. It's a good sales story because you go, you've got a problem, we've got the solution. So this is your kind of rags to riches story. Here's a problem, we can solve it. It's a very optimistic story. And the moral of the story, if you like, is we can do this. Come on, we can do this. That's why it's such a positive story. That's why we like Cinderella stories. It's not just Cinderella. It's like, it's Rocky. You know, here's a bum who becomes a champion. It's also your entrepreneur's classic story. Steve Jobs starts making computers in the garage. Yep, rags to riches. It's a very positive story. There's nothing wrong with it, except if that's the only story you tell, there's a danger. Because you're trying to tell that story and we're hearing another one. We're hearing a different story. Let me show you why. Tech entrepreneurs are a great example, because they are the giants who've made the new world, and so we like their rags to riches stories. We also like another kind of story about tech people. See if you can see how this story ends. This is a story, again, what happens next in this story? And I bet that you can finish this story for me in just 3 words. So what happens next? The founder of Match.com lost his girlfriend to a man she met. How does that story end? The founder of Match.com lost his girlfriend to a man she met on Match.com. That's how that story ends. Now, if the answer had been in a bar or while out jogging or on holiday, that's not a story. We wouldn't tell that story. That's a story, because that's the story of somebody very, very clever coming crashing down. And we like those stories. In fact, we're kind of wired for those stories. Think about the story of the Titanic. It's the same kind of story. The Titanic isn't a famous shipwreck because more people died than any other shipwreck. It's way down the order of disasters. It's quite a small disaster, really, compared to some of the others. The reason why we know the Titanic story so well is because some idiot said the Titanic is unsinkable. So that's the pride and then the fall. It's the same as the story of Icarus. It's the same as the story of the Tower of Babel. It's a very, very old story. Let me give you another little example. We can see these stories playing out in real life. Just watch this bit of video that was shot on a dashboard camera. So you can see there's a guy walking across the road. He owns the road. He's proud. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. That's what we want to see happen. When we see people who are full of pride, like the Titanic, the people who built the Titanic, we kind of want to see them fall. Because part of us is thinking, this sounds too good to be true. So anytime you're listening to somebody trying to sell you something and they're giving you the really hard sell, that's how you're feeling. You're thinking, yeah, this sounds too good to be true. Maybe your customers are thinking the same when you talk about your product. They're thinking, yeah. Okay, so you need to move on. You need to move past this story. You need to move into another story, a better story. And that is the story, well, it's the story of the Hobbit. It's also the story of the Dragon of the North, the Estonian folk story, because it involves a magic ring. So what's going on in the Hobbit story? Well, the Hobbit story is a journey, and it's a journey from your comfort zone to a better place. But you go through a crisis to get there. So things are not easy. They don't just go in a straight line. You go down before you go up. Think about the Hobbit story. So the Hobbit story basically is, the Hobbit is a character who lives in his comfort zone. He lives in the Shire, back in the, it's a kind of rural existence, very peaceful, very quiet, but very boring. And he's invited to come on an adventure with some dwarfs to steal some gold from a dragon. But before he can get to the gold, he has to go through a whole series of trials. And then there's a low point in the story where Bilbo is in a cave in the dark. He's pursued by monsters, by goblins and this terrible monster called Gollum, who are after him. But it's down in the dark in the cave that he finds this magic ring. Okay, now the magic ring makes him invisible, gives him special powers. And he uses the ring to escape from the monsters, but also he uses the ring to steal the gold and to make the world a better place. So the moral of this story is there's treasure in the dark. And if you think about it, if the ring had been lying on the grass outside Bilbo's house in the Shire, somebody else would have found it already and taken it. So you don't find treasure in your comfort zone. You find treasure in the crisis. When things get bad, that's when you find your treasure. You learn your important lesson in the crisis. And then you take what you've learned and you drag it back into the real world. So how does this apply to coronavirus? Because you need to tell stories about coronavirus. Well, 6 months ago, I was due to be speaking at this conference in Tallinn. And I had a whole load of work lined up face-to-face, dealing with clients in Tallinn. And then lockdown happened and all that work went. All that work disappeared. I didn't do any online work at all before coronavirus. All I did was face-to-face training work. Within 2 weeks, I'd created online training resources and I'd started to get clients booking for online. And because I used to work in TV, I know how to make online presentations work. And so the work's got better and better. And actually, I'm not going to go back. I've learned something in the crisis. I'm not going to go back to my comfort zone. I'm going to carry on offering online training all the time. It's a better thing to do than flying around Europe all the time. So that's my coronavirus recovery story, the treasure I found in the dark. But you've got one too. Every company that's still in business now, after the crisis, has a recovery story to tell. So let's give you an example. This is Epocracy, a product made by the Net Group, an Estonian company. And this allows legislators and politicians to discuss, to vote on, and to pass legislation without ever meeting in the same room, because sometimes you can't in this crisis. Tallinn City Council have been using this system. It was up and running really, really quickly. In fact, the day I was talking to Epocracy about Tallinn City Council using this system already, in Westminster, British MPs were queuing for 90 minutes to cast one vote. Look how much better this system was than what we were doing in the UK. So the treasure in the dark on this story is Estonia has the X-Road. Estonia has the digital infrastructure that allows this system not just to work, but to work and people trust it. So you've got treasure, and we found it in the dark, and now you're making the world a better place. So that's your company story, but your customers have a COVID story too. So again, going back to Silent Space, the companies that Silent Space are now selling to have realised their treasure are their staff, the good people who work for them, and they need to get those people back to work in the office. They need to get them back safely. So Silent Space is your COVID safe solution for getting people back to work, getting your teams, your best people working together again. So you've got COVID stories and they follow this pattern. They follow that roller coaster pattern where you get to a better place, but you go dark first because you find the treasure in the dark. You can think about Estonia's own story. The story of Estonia over the last 100 years is a similar kind of story. 1918, you have independence. Then you have that period of invasion and occupation. Very, very dark. And then you come out of it to the modern age, but you learned something down there in the dark. You learned the importance of resilience, the importance of independence, the importance of having tough infrastructure. You've learned all those things, and that's made Estonia the place it is today. So you have also been on this journey. So what I think is interesting, we've talked about that question of when people see the Estonian dial tone, what do they think? So your story as a company can tie in with the story of Estonia. And as an outsider, it seems to me there are three things about Estonia that always struck me. Is that Estonia is, yes, very proud of being a digital country, but also people in Estonia are very reliable. And then there's something here about this Nordic. Estonia is a Nordic country, and that means something. So you can make your stories as a company tie in with the story of Estonia when you need to build up that trust. Why should we do business with an Estonian company? Well, because Estonia is a country that is digital, reliable, and Nordic. Let me give you some examples in company terms. When I talk about digital, you might think, okay, here we go, another story about the IT sector, but not necessarily. So this is Standard Furniture. Standard make hotel furniture, which is, they've been making furniture for decades. So why is that digital? Well, when the lockdown happened, Standard's customers said, well, we need new furniture in our hotel, but you can't come and measure up. So Standard put a digital scanner into the post it to their clients, then the clients scan the room, send the scans back, and before the digital scanner has even arrived back in Estonia, they've started work on the furniture, and that furniture fits perfectly into that hotel space because an old-fashioned furniture company is using the cutting-edge digital technology. So it's not just an IT story, it's every company's story in Estonia can be a digital story. Then let's talk about reliability. Let's talk about the engineering sector. So I was talking to Kalev at Elektrimasinad, and he was saying, look, we repair electric motors. This is what we do. We service for the manufacturing sector. We're very proud of our quality. I said, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, we give a guarantee. We do a piece of repair work. We guarantee it for 12 months. If it goes wrong, we fix it for free. I said, oh, that's good. How many do you fix? And he said, well, we did 1,000 repairs last year. We only had to fix one on the guarantee. And I said, that's good. Tell me about the one. And he said, oh, well, okay. So, client sends us a motor. We fix it in our factory and we send it back. And 6 weeks later, the client's on the phone and he's really, really angry, saying, this job you fixed is broken again. Come and do something about it. So this time we send our engineer to the factory, to the client, and he repairs the motor. And yes, the motor has burned out again, so there's something wrong. So he fixes it for free. And then he looks around and he realizes that the machine that the motor is attached to in the factory, the connection is loose. And that's what's making the motor burn out. So it's not Kalev's fault. It's the client's fault. But the engineer fixes that too for free. So Kalev's angry customer becomes his best, happiest customer. So that's a story. You can see it, you can imagine it, and it's a story. The moral of the story is we are reliable, you can trust us. So again, what's your version? You can tell us happy customer stories, but tricky customer stories, they're fantastic, especially if you make a tricky customer happy. Finally, there's the Nordic question, the Nordic issue. So Estonia is a Nordic country. What does that mean? Well, it obviously means something in terms of Nordic has a certain feel in terms of design companies, in terms of clothing and food. It has a certain feel. But it also has important things. So for example, in Palmako make timber frame garden furniture, garden buildings, and they make it with Estonian wood, Nordic wood. Why does that matter? Well, you're very, very far north. Things grow slowly in the north. That means the timber that you have in your products, if it's Nordic timber, doesn't split. It lasts a lot longer. It's much tougher than, say, from Eastern Europe or the Mediterranean. So that's why Nordic matters to your customers, because this is quality. The same goes for Coda, cider. they make cider with winter apples that grow in the north, and it tastes different. The same goes for chocolala. Yeah, I'm going to have some of this chocolate in a minute. The same goes for chocolala. They're making something that's Nordic. So what's your version? So my question to you to finish is, this is what I take as an outsider from Estonia. But what's your version? What's your story? Thank you very much.